May I have a motion to return to public, please?
So moved. Papalardo.
Second? Second.
Bolton.
All in favor?
Aye.
Notice of this regular meeting of the Pitman Board of Education was advertised in the South Jersey Times, posted at Borough Hall, a copy thereof delivered to all Pitman schools to be posted, and posted on the district's website. Further notice was posted and filed as required by law, stating the board would meet in executive closed session at 7 p.m., followed by a regular meeting at 7:30 p.m. in the Pitman High School cafeteria. The president shall entertain any objections with supporting reasons to the conduct of this meeting on the grounds that it violates the Open Public Meeting Act. Seeing none. Welcome to March 2023 Pitman Board of Education meeting. Please join me in a moment of silence. Please join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Rose, will you please call roll?
Miller,
Here.
Grossman,
Present.
Iono,
Here.
Bolton,
Here.
Farrell,
Here.
Coe,
Here.
Crispin,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. This moves us to our presentation portion. Mr. Crispin?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about my back there, Board of Education. Oh, good evening, everybody. Certainly, we know why you're here. We're glad you're here. We're glad that you have obviously enough concern and are very interested in what's happening in our schools. Not a good day, needless to say. It's been a tough day, very tough day. Unfortunately, for myself and Krista and the board, we've known that this was something that was a possibility, at least for a little bit of time when we received our state aid numbers. But it looks like now it's becoming obviously more of a reality, and we want to talk about that tonight. And we're trying to be as transparent as we can, as difficult as this message is to deal with, especially how important the schools are to this community. Like you, kids who go through those schools, it's a very fabric of our community. It's very important to people. So what I would like to do is just take a couple minutes and kind of take you through kind of how we got to this point. I'm not going to be able to provide a lot of details because there's so many details that would need to be provided. I intend on doing that more so on the community meeting on Monday night for those that might have an interest in coming, to try to give people a little bit more of a background in terms of why we're in a position where we're losing the amount of state aid that we're losing, and I'll touch upon that. So we know this is part of an effort of the state to kind of equalize the state aid across the state of New Jersey. It's part of a Senate bill. It's called S2. That's what I reference it. We are in the 5th year of 6 years. Next year will be the 5th year of a 6-year effort to, again, correct a problem that the state perceives as far as how state aid is allocated to districts. Kind of took the board a couple weeks ago through a complete history lesson. I'll provide, again, a little more of those details on Monday, but it is what it is. And the basic fact is the fact that for many years we were overfunded based on the number of students that we had, especially with our student population going down. And now the state is trying to, in their minds, fix that by getting us to a point where our state aid represents what we truly should be receiving. And in their eyes, we were probably overfunded, probably close to amount about $5 million. You saw the number that I sent out today. It was $4,301,000. And there's a potentially going to be another adjustment in that 6th year. That's a significant amount of money. And obviously, it's a major part of the funding that we count on to be able to support our school programs. So we're in the 5th year next year of 6 years. Last year, we lost $1.1 million. And I'm sharing with you exactly what I shared with the staff this afternoon with the administrative team prior to that meeting. We had a reduction of $1.1 million. And as I said, the administrative team, for the most part, it probably didn't look any different. $1.1 million. Well, we absorbed $1.1 million last year, and our schools are still open. We still have X, Y, and Z at each of those schools. Everything looks pretty good. But what you don't know is we took about $900,000, almost $1 million of one-time monies that we had available to us. Some of that from the federal government through our ESSER grant, some of it through just a budgeted fund balance, which is a savings that the board has available to it for one-time things to kind of cover for that reduction in state aid. We did lose some positions, but the reality was it was kind of a wash to some extent. But we did lose some positions, but not nearly what we're experiencing now. So going into this year, not only do we have the 1.5 that we lost, but now we have that 900,000 that was used last year to cover positions that if we wanted to be able to maintain those positions, we'd have to find another 900,000, which we don't have. So that's another 900,000 needs to be cut. We're in the ballpark of $2.8 million that would have to be that has to be reduced from the budget in order for us to be able to balance the budget and to be able to present to the county office for their approval. And it's just not possible. That's where we are. Chris and I have been working for the last couple of weeks, looking at every different possible angle. What can we do? And we start with the potential of just, okay, let's take all the nice things that we enjoy, which we think are necessities, but just let's see how far that can get us. And as an administrative team, we're very fortunate. 5 schools, which is not the model of the state. They would never want to financially support a district with 5 schools for 1,000 students, but 5 schools, 5 administrators, 5 nurses, 5 guidance, 5 custodial staff, everything that it takes to support that. Let's try to see how we can work with that to maybe get us to a number. And obviously it's a very small amount. That we're dealing with. So what I shared with the administrative team and with the board, I didn't quite go into the details, in my letter, but we are looking at the possibility, the strong possibility of having to close schools in order to get our budget to where it needs to be in order to submit it to the state. We looked at one school. If you're going to do one school, the only really option is the middle school. And it just did not provide us the level of savings that we need to balance the budget. So the next level beyond that was the 2 schools, which are the 2 elementary schools, which would be Walls and Kindle, of course. The possibility of those 2 being closed, making the middle school the elementary school, potentially. Again, remember, this is all very, very preliminary as we're kind of just now going to get to a point where we can start really working through the details. Maintaining Memorial as a pre-K to 1 building. Middle school becomes the elementary school, which would be grades 2 through 6. And the high school will become a senior high school, 7 through 12. And I can tell you right now, there's more questions there than I have answers for. The first big question is, can the high school be a 7 through 12 building? And, you might say, yeah, of course it can. We're down number of students, but it's different when you look at it from a programmatic perspective. You could add 200 students to high school right now and probably have minimal impact because they're just filling empty seats. But now we're talking about a separate program. And what does that look like? And that's where we really need to get the administrators together. Ideally, the maximum savings is realized when they overlap and they have the same schedule or the same times and the same periods, because then high school teachers could teach a middle school class. Like, for example, we have high school math, Algebra 1, that we offer at the middle school. That could be taught by high school. They could actually be in a high school class. We have Spanish 1 that's taught at the middle school. That could be in a high school class. So there is some overlap between those 2, but they're obviously schedules would have to be exactly the same. So those are the things that we have to take a look at. And is there other possibilities within there that's going to enable us to realize some level of a savings? Or if not, do we need to separate the 2 and have maybe some time at the beginning that's just high school, time at the end might be just middle school, maybe they just overlap in the middle. A lot of things that have to be examined. So that's a big question mark, and it's a big part of potentially making this plan work. On paper, in terms of classroom size, the middle school does work in terms of the number of classrooms you would need for grades 2 through 6. It might even work for 1 through 6. We would like the idea of maybe keeping the first graders separated for another year before bringing them into that building. But now then the question is, Can we now maintain the first grade at Memorial School? Another question. We're adding 2 preschools to Memorial next year. We need to, and we need to continue to add. We're hoping to add 2 more the following year to be able to handle our maximum population. Unfortunately, we do have a waiting list for the preschool program next year. So that's a need. We need to bring back a preschool disabled program at Memorial, which is another classroom. So it is going to be very, very tight with first grade at Memorial. So there might be some flexibility that could swing to the elementary school if indeed it needed to. So again, a lot of questions there in terms of what that might look like. When we were going through the strategic planning, grade level configuration meetings, and even maybe the high school sustainability meetings, we were looking at all the different options that were available for the district as far as how it could be reconfigured. And as I shared this afternoon, none of those options included the one I just described. Because every one that we were looking at was, okay, let's put an addition at the high school to handle the middle school. Let's put an addition over Memorial School to handle. Well, we don't have the availability of that addition, and we don't even think that's even an option for the future because we don't have the bonding capacity, I don't think, to even add an addition anywhere. So this might be our future reality, given what we're dealing with here. So that's the kind of the plan that I laid out there this afternoon and shared with the teachers. So again, we're about 2.5 million plus or minus that needs to be reduced in order for us to get to a balanced budget. I shared with the staff this afternoon that probably represents somewhere between 25 and 30 staff members in this district. And that's just hard to deal with, very hard to deal with. But again, that's our reality. So that's kind of where we are tonight. Just taking my notes real quick. I've shared with the staff the details in terms of there's some decisions that need to be made. In terms of timelines, we have to finalize the budget at the April 19th public hearing. That's next month. We got a little bit over 6 weeks, maybe somewhere around 6 weeks, maybe even probably less than that, in order to finalize these decisions. A lot to be decided. As I shared with the staff, we certainly want to finalize decisions as quickly as we can so that we can inform people in terms of where they stand relative to employment for next year. So a lot of very difficult decisions moving forward. I think we want to open it up. This is kind of a combination of our public session. Yeah, so we're kind of open. If people have questions, I'll do the very best I can to answer them. And yep.
Here too.
I'm going to put this up here.
Community interest. This is the first of 2 public comments we will have tonight. Typically, this public hearing is on agenda items only, but based on the nature of this evening's presentation, we will be opening this public hearing to any topic the public would like to discuss. This is a public comment, not a dialogue between the board and the public. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and it's your opportunity to comment or ask questions. In accordance with board policy 0167, we ask that you state your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable. To be recognized to speak, please stand behind the microphone and please sign in on the sheet provided at that table with your name and municipality and speak clearly into the microphone. Sorry.
We need to say names into the microphone.
Yes, please.
Judy Walker, 503 Hudson Ave. Are you planning to appeal the decision to the Department of Education?
Am I on? Am I on? Are we on? Are we on? I don't think that was the one either. Okay, I think we're back on. Yeah, Judy, certainly is a very good question, and that's something that the board certainly can consider. I'm going to give you my perspective, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background that goes along with that perspective. What we're appealing is the funding formula that has been approved by the state legislature. And I go back to this S2. S2 again is State Senate Bill, it's number 2. That's what, in essence, we would be appealing. And remember, we are not the only district in New Jersey that is impacted by this. There's a number of districts that have lost aid that are part of S2. So it would not be just something that probably would be applicable. You know, if they're going to give consideration to Pitman, they would obviously have to give consideration to everyone else. Again, without going into a lot of detail, and if I can, I will maybe go into some detail on Monday. The way the funding formula is structured, they came up with what they entitled an adequacy budget. An adequate budget, they used the word adequacy. And it's a formula that was derived by what they thought or what they think would be the, let's say, I'm going to use the word optimal school district. Size of the school, number of administrators, number of students in a classroom. You can look it up, and it's a pretty well detailed calculation that they use to determine what they believe a school district should receive that's adequate for a child in the state of New Jersey. All right? We are more than 20%. 120%, it's 20%, right?
And they want us at 90.
And then, so we're 20%. If you want to use, I can use 100% as adequate, right?
90, they say 90% is adequate.
And they want us to be at 90% of adequacy. We are so far over adequacy that I don't believe anyone would give us any consideration. But certainly the board, this community, you can contact your local our local representatives. You can express your concern. The minute they hear, and I know we don't want to hear this, and again, you know, I've been through this, but they don't want to hear that we're a district that has just over 1,000 students. I don't think we're 1,100, are we? 1036. We have 1,000 students, and we have 5 schools, and we have 5 administrators, an administrator at each of those schools, and we have all the supports at each of those schools that mirror each other. As much as we value that and we love that, and it makes Pitman what's Pitman, I don't know that they're going to see that. And I think in order for us to be able to ever get to a point where we can appeal anything, we got to get that adequacy number down to a level in which at least we're showing an effort to be where they want us to be. The bottom line is, if we get to 90%, I don't think we will, even with all these reductions, but who knows? If we get to 90%, they will hold our state aid for next year harmless. There would be no reductions. That is a promise that they have made. The calculation is not an easy calculation to figure out. You know, we may possibly be able to figure out how much would need to be reduced to get to 90%, and it's certainly going to be part of our consideration. I think we're going to find it very difficult to get there. There's one other factor that is factored into that formula, and that is student enrollment. And that's another thing that's been hurting us over this period of time. As many of you know, if you've been at any of our meetings, and I hand out that little sheet of paper, and it shows our enrollment for the last 10 years, it's just been a continual decline. It's the nature of our community. We don't have new construction in this community. Homes don't turn over as much as we might think they do to families with children. People are making decisions for whatever reason to educate their children at other institutions and districts, their school choice. There's multiple options that they have. So, you know, all these factors are working not to our favor relative to this calculation. And I'm not sure how much we can influence those individuals who are responsible for that. A great question, but again, something the board may want to consider.
Please.
Yes. Hi, Greg Patterson, 117 Magnolia Avenue. A couple things. I've been to a lot of the community meetings and things like that. So we always knew that we were going to lose some amount of money in the budget this year. We didn't know, I mean, as far as the community goes, that we took $900,000 in federal grants or however we got that money that we weren't going to get this year. So we always, it seems to me that we always knew there was going to be a big shortfall this next year. I'm a little confused why we weren't planning beside the strategic planning committee, but more specifically, why we weren't planning to close schools prior to this, because it seems like we knew this was coming. Maybe it's $300,000, $400,000 more than we thought, but it seemed like we were going to have a huge shortfall even without the updated budget. But I might be wrong about that. It seems from the numbers that I've seen that that's true. Second, have we considered in the budget what the impact would be of closing the high school and having people sent other places? Because I know that's not something that many people want to do, but I think it's worth considering if there is a budget savings there.
Yeah, I'll say great. Two great points. As far as the first point is concerned, I don't know. Certainly, we recognize that there was the possibility. The calculation is not an easy calculation to determine, but we certainly knew, and we've talked to the board about the fact that this is something that's possible. I think the important thing here, though, is we're not just dealing with a calculation. There is an element of politics. And there's nothing that's an absolute certainty. And I'll tell you, I'll take the responsibility because I've been involved, obviously initiated a lot of these meetings. And I'm the kind of likes to be somewhat optimistic that hopefully we can survive this. That maybe I kind of always was under the opinion that we were peaking at the 1.1 and that we were hopefully going to be coming down this, and gradually working out of the issues of the adequacy budgets and the adequacy adjustments. I got to tell you, I never dreamed that it'd be 1.5, and preliminary numbers, are, in that ballpark. So yeah, there certainly was that. But you just never know until you get the numbers. Because as I said, things historically have changed significantly from what you think they're going to be to what the reality is going to be. Politically, somebody could have said, listen, we feel that there's been enough pain and suffering already. If you get the right districts putting the right pressure, and S2 could have gone away for all that. So, point well taken, here we are, and now we need to make those decisions. High school is something that always can be considered. I mean, we know it. We've talked about it. I think there would be a desire to try to survive this year with hopefully maintaining the high school, if that's at all possible. That's going to take a whole nother level of transitions and in terms of decision-making. That is a huge, huge decision. And it's not just the decision of yes or no. That's huge. But the next level of the decision is where. And that is going to need to take some time. I mean, I would think that as a community, that's a decision that we want to make sure we make the right one. We pick the right district. A lot of people will have a lot of different opinions. It's going to take a process. I will probably say it's probably something we need to begin early next year, just in case. If the decision is to maintain the high school students here, and we're able to get through next year, and then there is another major reduction in state aid, and we've done everything we can, that's certainly going to have to come back on the table. It's going to have to. But I just think, for somebody, again, when you're here in Pitman, you want to hold on to as much as you can, want to hold on to as long as you can. And there's some people that will say that's the good thing, and it's not the right thing, but we're going to go through a number of adjustments next year. We've done some preliminary calculations in terms, I think what you indicate is what that savings might be. There's some factors in there that are very hard to determine. Transportation is the biggest. Because right now, obviously, we don't transport. We've had districts unofficially give us numbers. The numbers that they're giving us won't work. But if we get to that point and we're saying to them, no, this is the number, it's a take it or leave it, maybe it's a little bit different. So yes, definitely something that's going to have to be considered. Anybody else?
Jason Blackmore, 712 West Holly Avenue. Thank you all for volunteering, doing all this. Can't be easy. Has there been any studies or any contact with schools that are doing the 7 through 12 in the area? Do we have any dialogue with them? I guess, are there any examples of schools that are doing that? Can you provide that? And maybe some kind of dialogue with what worked for them and what didn't work?
Yep, a great question. We're not there, but I think it's going to a step that we'll need to take. We know that there are schools out there with this level, this structure. All of our regional school districts are 7 through 12 high school regionals. Clearview, we know, is a 7 through 12. Gateway is a 7 through Delsey, and Kingsway are 7 through 12 high school districts. The model that we're probably getting closer to, I was a superintendent for 3 years at Audubon. Audubon is a junior, senior high school in the same building, sharing common areas. Hatton Township is a high school, the junior high school that basically share some of the same common buildings. Differences generally there have been additions that have been added that kind of keep maybe students a little bit more separated. I think that's the challenge we're going to face here without any additional spaces, that there's a number of spaces that have to be shared. That'll be one of the pieces that we will have to evaluate. From a program perspective, the opportunities to visit these schools will be something that we'll probably want to take advantage of, just to see how they deal with this from a more educational, problematic type approach. It's going to be a big part, of the transition. I had, and just as a side note, I know Steve Gangloff, is it Steve? No, I'm sorry, it was Chris Morris. Chris Morris grew up in Hatton Township, and this was kind of before they did their additions. And he says, I just always knew Hatton Township was just, we were all together. It was just 7 through 12. We were just in the same building, and just kind of like it was one school. I don't know that we're at that point. I think, in our early thinking, we still see separation. We have a block of classrooms up in this upper right-hand corner. You need 8 potentially for the middle school, 1, 2 for each subject. We would have 6 up there in that block, and we'd probably have to pick a couple science labs if we could, or 1 science lab to share. So I think there's going to be ways in which we can do that, but there are going to be some challenges given that we do have just the 1 cafeteria and some of the other common spaces.
Jeff Canals, 222 Enbury Avenue. I know you were saying that this plan is still very preliminary and there's still plenty to decide. I was just curious as to what the time frame and forum would be for any updates, any changes, just so I can keep abreast of what's happening.
Very good. Well, we have the first community meeting on Monday. I would probably take some time to go in a little bit more details in terms of some of the different elements that we've talked already about, the state funding, decision-making. Hopefully by then, maybe we work through a few more of the details. As we said, it's probably, in some respects, going to move somewhat quickly. It's not to say that April 19th is an absolute. The board has to approve the final budget to submit to the county. We would like that to be as close to reality as it possibly can be. We're not 100% bound to it, but we would like it to more or less represent all the positions and where they are going to be in the budget. It may not represent all the decisions relative to who the individuals will be, relative to who will be in those positions, because that's a whole process in itself. But I think we're somewhat confident that at least we can get the budget balanced before the 19th to at least represent the positions, and then hopefully then the next step would be the decisions and who those individuals will be. In terms of, I think the other pieces, unless somebody comes up with an option that's going to save us, the 2 million or 2.5 million, the rest is just details. It's logistics, and we are going to use strategic planning to help us through some of those logistics. We are going to use grade level configuration for those people that have participated in the grade level configuration meeting. Unfortunately, the decision, and again, I was more optimistic, and maybe I was too optimistic, in thinking that we were going to have an opportunity to evaluate all the different options and pick what we thought was best. I really felt that we were going to get through this, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be the case. So I see a shift now in terms of the logistics of what do we need to do to ensure the success of this plan. When you think about, to me, the biggies, Memorial should be fine. It's going to be a little crowded if we have first grade there, and we'll have to make some accommodations, maybe to grab another classroom. We're going to have to accommodate the specials and decide how we're going to handle specials, because we may have to use some of those classrooms. But we're going to have to look at the middle school as an elementary. The first thing that jumps out at you, what are we doing for a playground? It's a biggie. It's a real biggie. Options are limited. I mean, the potential of using Summit is certainly an option, but now we're dealing with the road, students crossing the street, and what is that logistic, and what are the other options that go along, the pickups and the drop-offs and all the things that, are circle around an elementary school. So I think it's going to shift more to, if this is really the only option we have, what are those logistics that we need to work through?
And just as a quick follow-up, as long as the budgetary concerns are settled by that April 19th or thereabouts, things like configuration of what grades are going to be in what schools, that are those decisions that can still shift after that date.
The answer is absolutely yes. The budget does not dictate where students and staff are housed. We obviously, for practical reasons, would like to maybe have that finalized by then, and the budget will probably drive a lot of that. And again, this is just full transparency. A big question is going to be, how many classes do we have at each grade up to sixth grade? I'm just going to be honest. How many can we financially support to get our budget in balance up to sixth grade? We could not have this conversation under the current structure, because we have 2 at each of the 2 elementary schools. You can't take one away from a school, because now we're out of balance unless we're going to move students from one school to another. Obviously now, there's a strong likelihood that grades, probably kindergarten, first, second, and third, or maybe 1, 2, and 3, will have 3 grades, 3 classes at those levels. And the numbers support that. But would it be nice to have 4 and have a lot less students in a classroom? Absolutely. Unfortunately, it's probably not something we're going to be able to do. The question is going to be grades 4, 5, and 6. Those numbers are much higher. And right now we have 4 at each of those levels. But are we going to be able to maintain that? So the budget is going to drive a lot of those logistics. And again, just full transparency. If it was 4 of every grade level in 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we could not bring first grade over. There's not enough classrooms. If there's only 3 of 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, there would be enough room to bring first grade over. Now, again, it's the question, board question, community question. Do you want first grade with 6? It happens. A lot of schools have that. It's not uncommon. And that would provide a significant amount of relief for Memorial School in terms of future expansion of the preschool program, as well as just the expansion that we're going to experience next year with the 3 additional classrooms we need.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Sarah Mickle, 1203 Glen Lake Boulevard, and I'm a teacher here. Hi, Mr. Christman. So after the meeting this afternoon, I stopped at my parents' house to kind of process it. And one of the points that my mom brought up, so they're looking, they're about at the time to sell their house. And I look around the room, this is like a high school reunion for me. And I know a lot of you, our parents are around the same age. So my question is this sustainable? Meaning, let's say my parents sell their house and a family with 4 children move in, right? So as far as projectability, so if the numbers do go up in the next 10 years, is this sustainable?
When you just clarification on this being this model.
Yes.
Okay, well, in terms of sustainability, the middle schools and elementary school, I'm talking, we could do 4 easily of every grade, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Certainly bringing the first grade over provides some level of relief, but we certainly could do that. And I would think that that's sustainable. Additional numbers at the high school is the unknown right now. We really don't know with both the middle school, with both as a 7 through 12 building, I think we're confident we can make it work, but we know at the high school level, when we talk about high school sustainability, we're looking to add numbers. What does that mean in this model? We're talking about a high school that has 330, and we think we need 400 to be sustainable. That's 70 more students in a building that now has 7th and 8th grade. You know, although they're going to be still contained in high school classrooms, in desks that are currently empty, really don't know. I think the concern that potentially is out there, and I think it's a little bit tied to somebody who may want to move to this community, and asking those kind of questions, what's happening with the district is a little bit of a concern right now, you know, especially maybe at the high school. I know we have differences, maybe differences of opinions, but you know, for somebody to say, wait a minute, is Pitman still where I want my children to go to school if there's a little bit of uncertainty about where they're going to go to high school, or whether or not we can, like I said, I guess your point being whether we can maintain what we're talking about. I would like to see a little bit more room at Memorial, if that's at all possible. Remember, there's still the potential, we'll see where it goes, of a referendum. There is still that opportunity, and we will still continue with those discussions. This kind of helps to narrow the focus of that conversation down a little bit. So whether or not we want to talk about a potential addition to the high school to maybe create more of a junior high 7-8 bank of classrooms somewhere that's more separated, or if we need another shared area like an all-purpose room or a cafeteria of some sort for the middle school students to be able to have. You know, certainly after 1 year of experiencing all those students together, that might be something that will need to be considered.
Mr. Crispin, if I could just add, Mrs. Mickle, in 2019, the district did go out for a demographer to study the population within the community. The anticipation is that we would remain flat. Declining enrollment is definitely an issue across the board, you know, within the state. It's not something that only Pitman is facing, but even with the turnover, and the demographer study kind of indicated of some of our older population homes going to families, it's likely that we will remain in this kind of level playing field in the future. And I'm just going to add one more thing while we're waiting for the next speaker to Mrs. Walker. In terms of appealing the state's decision, I do want the public to know that members of the board have kind of examined every avenue that could be available to us, in addition to what the staff has already done. You know, they've obviously done their due diligence 10 times over. But stabilization aid, emergency aid, those were all forms of relief that we could consider, that we kind of evaluated. And there's still some interest, I think, in, but may not actually translate to us receiving funds. Last year, there was a maintenance of equity, one-time payout, so to speak, from an error on the New Jersey Department of Ed's behalf that allowed us, when we were a high needs district, to receive some additional funding. That wouldn't be an option that would be available to us. So we've definitely kind of tried to look in every corner and check every number twice and make sure that, you know, we've done everything we can do to see if there's any relief to be found. And thus far, it has not been hopeful.
And just to clarify I wasn't suggesting we appeal SB2 as a whole, but rather a much larger size of the cut than was initially projected.
I think it checks out. I had pen and paper, and it looks like it's where it's supposed to come in at.
Diane Shirley, 28 Evergreen Avenue. First, Mr. Crispin, I just want to thank you that you are at the helm as their superintendent. It's nice to have someone from town who has a heart for the town and understanding of how we feel, having raised your family here as well. So I really appreciate that. I think it's long overdue that we have considered closing a school, and I think it's going to be a financial decision that has been needed to be made for a really long time. I'm just curious about why you would keep the oldest school open. When my kids were here for the bond referendum and we fixed all these elementary schools and added wonderful media centers and, did everything we could to refurbish those old schools, why you would consider keeping the one school that I think should close, the middle school, and use the other buildings. But that's just, just think about that.
Yeah, and I would echo that. If there's an option out there that somebody can come up with, I think right now it's just a matter of available classrooms. When, you look at option, okay, we can't move one elementary to the other elementary or vice versa. So that's not an option. How can we potentially close the two elementaries and maximize our savings? And right now, the middle school is the one that has all the most classrooms, I guess, is really, but no, we're open. I mean, if somebody has a thought, certainly have to consider it. Yes?
Alison DiMatteo, 530 Yale Ave. So I am a parent, a sub, and I also coach Little League in this town. My experience, bullying is very prevalent at the middle school grades. And I don't think I would feel safe with my 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-olds going to school with kids who can't control themselves. Like, I'm not kidding, it's not okay. I brought it up to attention of other people and it's been brushed off. I just want you guys to think about that when you're thinking about reorganizing the school and having the older kids with the little ones, because it's not okay. And I'm all for reorganizing and making everything work, but I think you need to look at the age levels and the maturity levels of the kids when you think about putting them together. Because I could tell you stories.
And certainly, Allison, it's a great point. There's certainly a concern in terms of what the perception is going to be, as parents do have choices nowadays in terms of where they would like to send their children to school. We do have a lot of logistics, but as I also said, this is not an uncommon structure. Most of the other schools that I mentioned, and most of those in Gloucester, except I think Gateway is the only one in which the buildings are kind of together, but are separated. And even at Audubon, there's some level of separation, even though in Audubon we shared a cafeteria, but we were still in the same building. There was a lot of crossing. I think certainly we know that we need to do everything we can to separate. And that's why I come back to the schedule. The schedule, if it's the same, allows us to share teachers. If it's not the same, it enables us to provide an environment in which students are really never passing at the same time. So these are absolutely the considerations and some of the issues that we know we have to deal with.
Catherine Lawrence, 515 Florence Ave. Thank you, Mr. Crispin. Thank you, board. I know that some of us in here may not have been here for the longest time, but my question kind of goes back to knowing back when S2 was introduced and knowing roundabouts where funding would end up for our town from the beginning of S2. Why was there no plan put in place for the surplus that we did have during that time, going forward, particularly with knowing things like declining enrollment? I mean, those were already things we were experiencing during that period of time. And I know, like I said, a lot of you weren't here during that time. I just don't know if anybody has those answers, because I know as a parent in the school system, I have high school and elementary. I know those are those things that I'm worried about. And then what was the purpose of reorganization in the past in terms of like the different schools, how they ended up when we did the reorganization in 2018 maybe, where we kind of just redid the grade levels, but that as a civilian in the matter, like I didn't see then how that was like saving us any money, because that seemed to be the purpose then. But it didn't seem to me. I know that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and I think I'll just, obviously, board jump in. I mean, the first one, you're right. I think you kind of answered the question. This is a very, very new board. I mean, I've been here less than a year, and obviously none of us were here at the beginning of S2, and we're kind of getting caught in the middle of this. And again, not to point fingers, but you're right. I think this is a conversation maybe we could have had a little bit earlier, so we could have planned a little bit better, but there's always these unknowns. With regard to second point, if anybody wants to,
Second point was?
Oh,
The
I
reorg,
would,
right?
I would
Yeah.
say similarly, this is a different board.
Yeah.
You know, I think that I'm not going to speculate on decisions that previous leadership made. I think everyone has always had the best interests of the students at heart and did the best that they could. And we have to work with what we have right now and make the best decisions go forward. That's where my focus is. And I imagine the rest of the board is, this is the hand we have and we have to play it.
Yeah, no, 100%. But as a parent, like that's, I mean, like that's where I'm coming from, is been watching it kind of unfold for years. Like it was just hard. I didn't know if anybody knew. So the answer is like, we don't know.
I think we just aren't going to speak on behalf of individuals that aren't at the table right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your volunteering for these positions and for your time. My name is Heather Lanier. I'm at 14 Adams Avenue, and I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this question. So I guess I'll sort of pitch it as a concern, and then whoever can think about it with me or with us, I think it'd be really helpful. I'm concerned about like the district sort of shrinking to a size that's super bare bones and trying to keep everyone together at the loss of things that make school so rich for kids, like extracurriculars, like solid inclusion programs for kids with disabilities, like great autism programs, like great enrichment and AP classes, specials, art, etc. All the things that get cut, sports when they're fringe sports, when they're not football, although football, I guess, struggles here too sometimes. I'm just worried that like we'll just sort of strip down to the absolute bare bones just to keep all these wonderful Pitman kids together. But it'll hurt so much in terms of enrichment and just richness. So I don't even know, if you can answer that. Have we thought about that? Have we thought about what kind of things get cut also? So no, we're talking about buildings and how to squeeze everyone together. But what else have you had to consider cutting? And I would say my vision is to think about how to keep things rich. And that possibly might mean having kids at the high school age go to another school, but keeping things really rich here together through the middle school years.
Yeah, I'll respond initially. So we, as I said, we're in the very early stages of kind of working through all the details, but I have to say, just in terms of, as I look at this from the surface perspective, I don't see the loss of the things that you just described. I mean, I think we're going to stay strong from a program perspective. No one is talking about cutting programs or cutting activities or any of those reductions. Staff in an indirect way could impact some of those things, because obviously if we're talking AP classes, and if your AP teacher just happens to be somebody who we have to let go, maybe is that potential, but there's other people that hopefully can still teach that class. So none of this should impact it from that perspective. What I see being impacted is class sizes are going to be impacted, especially potentially especially at the elementary level. If we're going from 4 to 3, it's going to impact class size. Does that have a indirect impact on our ability to provide maybe a better educational experience for those students? Yeah, more so. But then on the flip side, and I've shared this with the board, I've shared it with the staff, I think there's going to be some strengths that come out of this. Having all the elementary students together is a strength. You mentioned the students with disabilities. We're struggling right now because, our programs are split between 2 buildings. We have a building that has an in-class support as a co-teach model, and then we have another one over here that's more of a resource type model. And if you're a student that's in this program but needs this program, you have to up and move and go to another school. Now, having all those schools together are going to enable students to move more freely to the program that meets their needs, and to have all those staff together to help meet the needs of those students. So I think there's going to be some advantages. I don't see the disadvantages, at least now, relative to any impact relative to any current programs we have. And I think it's always our desire to look to see how we can continue to enhance those programs. So we'll see.
Thank you.
But good point.
Hi, Chris Tator, 252 Lake Avenue. Kind of piggybacking off of what was just said. I look at the numbers here, and I see, the high school has 324 students, and an elementary with almost 600. Obviously, the potential, the growth is in our elementary school. And what I've seen, in my years living here, is us keep putting Band-Aids on things instead of making the big changes that really could have a better impact and put us in a better place going forward. I'm a little afraid hearing what's being discussed so far, that we're putting more Band-Aids on things. So the idea of focusing our efforts on making a really excellent pre-K through 6 district and sending our older students off to a different high school, there just seems to be a lot more potential there. And I don't know if I really have a question, just other than I really hope we take the time to consider this holistically and be more forward thinking on how we can use this as an opportunity to get us on a stronger path going forward. Yes, we may not have to cut programs to make this work, but we're certainly not going to be able to grow programs. And from what I've seen, kids are leaving the high school and going to GCIT and going elsewhere because they're going on to programs that are, the 21st century programs that are what people a possible future. I don't see how we're able to have that growth here. My daughter's in the middle school. Walls was fantastic. A really great school. Middle school, we're not having such a great experience. And I talked to other parents there; they also don't have great experience in middle school. They don't want to stay in the district. So if we can use this time to really focus our efforts and try to make the best we can with the population that we have here, I think we're going to be better placed for the future.
Yeah, that's certainly a great point, and I would just like to throw a couple things out there just to make sure we're all remembering. I think we all feel the same way. A high school program this year brought in the first of our career pathways through funding through the state of New Jersey. We have a STEAM career pathway. We have about 15 students who are in that particular group that will be going through as freshmen through 4 years. We are bringing in our second career pathway next year, which is a business academy here at the high school. And we have, again, a cohort of 12 to 15 students who are in that particular academy. And then we will bring in our third cohort of an academy for the following year. Still a little bit undecided. We're looking at what the best population would be. So we are looking for ways in which we can strengthen our programs, especially here at the high school, to meet the needs of those students who might have those interests. But yeah, great point. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Allison Massimedi, 120 Grandview. So, difference of opinion, I don't want the high school to close.
Okay.
But you said we're not going to be able to get money to add an addition like we thought at one point. So how long will the high school be sustainable? Like, do we have an idea of how long? And if not, like, what happens to 7 and 8? So if you move 7 and 8 up, but then in 2 years, we can't keep the high school, where is 7 and 8 now going somewhere else? Like, what does that look like in the future?
Okay. So let's start with the high school sustainability. As we know, you saw the numbers there, about 330 students. We do have a group that's meeting to specifically talk about that issue. We do want to find ways in which we can potentially attract more students into the district. I indicated that we have some great programs that are now being offered. I know Sarah was up here earlier. I received an email today, and they feel that we need to also strengthen it down the performing arts area, that could be academy in itself and could be very attractive to people wanting to come in. And I agree 100%. And it's definitely something that we have spoken about. So that in itself is a kind of a separate initiative. How do we attract more people to want to come to Pitman High School? We know that that would probably have to be through our tuition program. So that is a conversation that absolutely will continue. Hypothetically, in the future, should we get to a point where for whatever reason, we can no longer sustain the high school, either from a numbers or an economic perspective, certainly there's the possibility it becomes the middle school. I mean, you could easily move sixth grade over. It would then you'd be able to easily move first grade back up and make the middle school, which is now the elementary, a first through fifth building. High school would be a great middle school, a 6, 7, and 8 building. It has everything you would need for a middle school. And hopefully that would help to even strengthen that program. So there are options there if indeed we get to that point where high school students, it's the decision of the community, the board, to send them to another school. But yeah, great point.
This is a much longer walk than that other public meeting that happens in
Yeah,
town,
much longer,
to get
huh?
to this microphone. Michael Razzie, 510 North Broadway. As a parent of Pitman School District students, and almost as important as a property owner in the borough of Pitman, who understands that my property value is directly tied to the availability of a K through 12 district, pre-K through 12 district. I just wanted to, if I could, and I thank you all for the time that you put in. I thank Mrs. Miller and Mr. Crispin for your leadership. But I want to just piggyback on what Mrs. Walker said. And I knew what you meant, not challenge S2, but to challenge the weight of this. And I heard everything that you said, that both you, Mr. Crispin, and you, Mrs. Miller, said. But when I look at the county and I see districts who have basically the same number of schools we do, who have the same enrollment that we do, seeing increases, your formula doesn't make sense. And I don't say your formula, I'm sorry. The formula doesn't make sense to me. If those are the things that they point to for this perfect district, there's no way you can support 5 schools. I understand that for a district with this many students. I get it. But when you see districts that have gone up, it does make you wonder why us, why did we see such a reduction? So I know we said it may be an effort in vain to challenge this, but I hope that in the course of doing everything else you're doing, and I know it's a lot, you still might consider that. So, thank you.
And just to provide some insight, I didn't go into the whole calculation, but the calculation is primarily based on that adequacy budget where they made a determination on how much the state is willing to support every student in the state. And then that number gets weighted if it's a middle school student, a high school student, a special ed student, any other special needs. The other factor is the community wealth. It's a big factor. And when you look at those communities, when you compare them to Pitman from a wealth perspective, they're in a whole different category. And I think, certainly potentially, because part of that wealth, it's based on 2 things. It's based on the net evaluation of the district, and it's based on individual income. And when you look at what's happening here from a community perspective in terms of the value of our properties, because of the things that we have here, it probably definitely factors into that. In a way, it hurts us.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought of that when Mrs. Mickle got up and spoke about her parents going to sell their home. Eventually, we will all sell our homes, or our families will sell our homes when we're gone. And I would like to think that everything that we've done as a community to make Pitman as attractive as we can, and we're still working, and there's still a lot to do, but I hope that's not lost because we lose this piece, that pre-K through 12 district.
Great point.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, the school funding formula is pretty concrete, like Mr. Crispin said, in that they're calculating based on your student population needs. But there's some other areas of the funding formula that definitely leave something to be desired. So to give you an example, they don't calculate our special education categorical aid based on the number of special education students that we currently have within our district. They use a percentage of the number of students enrolled in our district. I believe it's 15%. So they say 15% of your students would qualify for that special education categorical aid. That's it. So if you're a district where you perhaps have students with higher needs and more students who have been identified as special education students, you don't receive the balance of that funding that would be due in theory. There's quite a few factors that play a role in how they do those calculations, but in terms of the adequacy budget and our local fair share, which is based on those two calculations, even the percentage increase that we've seen, our local fair share, the multiplier, which is created by the state, used by the state, and they supply and have a proprietary process in which they arrive at it and have not shared with members of the public despite it being court challenged, is influenced by geographic factors and other political, kind of factors. And so when you look at those multipliers, for example, they've gone up every year, and it really is being done in an effort to disproportionately impact certain types of communities, and ours is one of them. So some of those, like I said, avenues of relief that we could potentially still consider and try for, like stabilization aid, emergency aid, those types of things are available. But in terms of the formula, the state has done a pretty good job of creating the math that works for them. And they've also never fully funded the formula. That's an aspect of it that people should also be mindful of. The idea was that the state would come in and say, this is your adequacy budget. This is how much money we think that it should take for a school district to run a efficient and thorough school. This is what we calculate your local fair share, what you should be raising in property taxes to offset this. And then here's the difference that the state will supply to you. But that would require the state to have fully funded the formula, which they have not done. So for a number of years, districts that fought to create, Senate Bill 2 to have it enacted felt that they were being unfairly funded because they were increasing in enrollment, but not seeing the same dollar to dollar increase. And so districts like ours are now facing that 2008 School Reform Act funding and what those specifications are. So for a couple years, everyone was kind of in a holding pattern, which kind of spoke also to why districts were left kind of hoping maybe they weren't going to take the money back, because for a couple years they didn't. And they let us keep our aid where we were previously because that's what the statute said. So districts were making decisions based on the information they had. We were still receiving those checks in that amount, and so we were spending them appropriately. But once they enacted Senate Bill 2 and they have started decreasing our additional state aid each year, that's when we've started to, feel that impact from year to year, and it's snowballed into this situation.
Chris McGuigan, 10 Clinton Ave. I know that we are not a choice district. I know that thing is a thing of the past. So be it. Has there been any communication, or can there be any communication with the state to say, listen, our numbers are declining. We're not the only ones that have numbers declining. Is there any fight that can be made against that? I know when S2 was originally brought up, it was a crazy idea for half the districts in the state because half of them were overfunded, half of them were underfunded. So the people that were overfunded, like we were, for the state, we're obviously hurting because we're losing money. I teach in a district where we continue to get money and we're benefiting. I also know that when it came to S2, a large chunk of the parents that argued for that came from my district because they felt they were getting the short end of the stick, for lack of better words. So I know they say, nope, sorry, that's over with. But is that something that we might want to think about arguing, right? I look here, I see it says 2021, great school. I think people still want to come to Pitman High School, but they don't have the choice, right? I mean, if you're in this district, you can come here, right? So is that something that could be something that the board would consider to go to the state to say, it was a thing of the past, but it's something that could literally save our district? Like, we're kind of drowning here. Like, Is that a possibility? Second question also, I know it's kind of sidebar, but if we're talking to staff about cutting 25, 30, whatever it is, positions, I'm assuming the board has communicated like a ballpark on what just the positions would save. I don't know if that's like a average per just staff member. Yeah, I don't know how they've done. I'm sure there's been communication about it. My thought is if it's 25 and there's a certain number and we close the schools, how much do we really stand to gain off of a building being empty, and what happens to that building to keep it, you know, from being an eyesore type thing? Does that make sense?
Not sure.
The cost, what is the cost of the staff? If we're talking about 25 cuts, approximately, is there a number that we would be saving at that point? And also, is there a number that we have in mind for the savings for closing 2 buildings? Or is that just, we know that's going to save us a lot of money, so that's what we're thinking of doing?
I'll start with your first one, because your first one was relative to choice, correct, Chris? So history there, choice was a program that was offered a number of years ago. Decision was made not to participate at BA Choice School District. We can certainly ask the questions. I can almost be 99.99% sure that the answer is going to be no. That's gone. It was funded separately. The state funded choice, and the state got to a point that they could no longer fund that separately, so they just shut it down completely. I was in a district at the time that was a choice district. We had our 3 full years. We were ready for our 4th. They said, no, we're done. It is done. And they would have to come up with a whole new budget to fund choice, which I don't see them doing, but certainly it can be asked. And, you know, when you talk about the cost, you know, for a school, well, number one, all the positions obviously have different salaries. So it's not an average or anything, you know, obviously you can go from, you know, a teacher down to a support staff member. So it varies, you know, depending on the position. The buildings are a little bit tough right now because we're not just vacating. We don't really know what we'll be doing. There might be a need for some offices if we have to move some people out of Memorial School. Thought we may have to relocate the child study team somewhere. We may have to relocate central administration. And maybe they go to one of those elementaries just to have an office space and allow the community to use that as another resource, you know, as far as the all-purpose rooms. We don't know. We got to keep some heat on, you know, in terms of not freezing pipes, those kind of things. So yeah, it's being factored in, and we'll realize a little bit of a savings, but hard to estimate. Yes.
Sorry, Catherine Lawrence, 515 Florence. People are watching live stream at home, and one of the big questions that is being asked is, what should we expect with elementary class sizes with this new configuration?
Yeah, they will increase, unfortunately. And as I said, just at the lower end, if you talk about the grades K, 1, 2, 3, obviously with 4 classrooms, which we had planned on having, we were looking at some very nice class sizes, and now with 3, I don't have the exact numbers. You can certainly send myself or Mrs. Rose an email, have anybody out there send us an email, and we can provide that based on what our numbers are currently. I had sent out those, for those people that have been involved in any of our meetings, again, send me an email, I'll send it to you. We've been providing a summary sheet of our state aid for the last 10 years and our enrollment for the last 10 years. And anybody that would have an interest in that, you send us a note, we'll email that out to you. And you could just take that number and you could divide it by 4 and then take that number and divide it by 3. Like you could take, for example, 4th grade. I've mentioned the possibility of 4th grade having to potentially reduce 1 class if indeed our budget can't support the 4 teachers. Well, take that number in 4th grade. Actually, it's the current 3rd grade number, which will be the next year's 4th grade number, divided by 4 and then divided by 3, and you can see the difference. And again, anybody wants that information, send that out and I will get that to them. But it's going to be more. And unfortunately, right now, we have some very large classes in some of our 4th and 5th grades, very large. And the likelihood is they'll stay at 4 because they are so large. I mean, they're pushing in the high 20s and potentially even close to 30. This will give us an opportunity to balance it. And I don't think we're that far off. I don't know them in schools, but you know, there's the potential right now maybe that we have like maybe 23 over here and 27 over here. And then when you put them together, they kind of average out at 25, let's say. I'm not sure it's that clean, but with all the classes together, we at least know that all the classes will be pretty much the same, but a little higher.
Hi, I'm Melissa Brown, 113 9th Ave. I have a question in regards to special education students. For those that are currently in self-contained classrooms, would we maintain that same, I understand that they could increase size-wise, like currently my one child's in self-contained and it's 3 students, and then a couple other students get pulled in throughout the day. How would we be allocating services to kids in that position? Because I know too that there is a concern that we are not properly funded for our special education students. And, you know, it's a big impact and I see it daily with my child. I will say, coming from Memorial last year, she was the one that was, their teacher just gone. We weren't told the teacher was gone. So for 2 months, they had rotating substitutes coming in and out of there. That was a very difficult transition last year for her. Now coming into this year, we're at Walls. We're having a lot of success and finally finding like our comfort level. Now again, to uproot her and put her somewhere else, it's just going to continue to pull back from where we've made so much progress. I understand, you know, buildings have to close, things have to happen, but what are we going to do to try to protect that special education population that we have?
Well, certainly we recognize that there's the strong possibility that they will be relocated to another building, and that is probably an absolute. Other than that, and I think I just mentioned this earlier, I see this potentially as a strength relative to the special ed population. As I look at Shay, we were struggling with the fact that we had programs in different buildings. Now everyone is going to be together. There is no conversation about changing the delivery of any of these services for special education. We are now going to have our teachers together with our self-contained teachers, with our pull-out resource teachers. If a student is in a resource setting and they're doing extremely well, it's going to be much easier for them to transition into a co-teach setting. I think in most respects, special education is going to be enhanced more than anything else. And I'm going to be, again, this is full disclosure, but you know, the question we're dealing with is, are we going to be able to maintain the same number of teachers? And are we going to be able to provide the same number of minutes in our co-teaching program that we currently have? We have a great program right now. And to think that, you know, there might have to be some changes to that is somewhat painful. But, you know, everything is going to be examined. And we're certainly going to try to maintain everything that we can, but having everybody together will only provide us, I think, better opportunities to make it stronger. All right, Madam President, and I guess we have one more. Yeah, that's all right.
Allison DiMatteo, 530 Yale Ave. I guess one of my questions is, how in the same year do we get the pre-K 3 grant and then get such a high budget cut?
Yeah.
And also, how do we know, how do we know for certain that those students that are in the pre-K 3 program are actually living in our district and not just using a family member or a friend's address and getting the benefits of our district, while next year they're going to go to a different school?
All right, so let's talk about that. I think for the most part, we're talking 2 very separate pots of funding. The S2 issues that we're talking about right now, they go back 6 years in terms of the decision that was made a long time ago and actually the funding formula was made much longer beyond that. They decided to go with the S2 adjustments, which we've been through. That is part of the state budget. It's part of school funding. It's just something that's always been there. The preschool aid is totally separate from that. They're really not connected. This is an initiative of our governor. It's an initiative of this legislature to support preschool funding for all students in this state. It's been a process in which they've started those districts that have the most need, and they've been working their way through. It's funding. It is not a grant. It is there. It is a commitment, and it's a commitment, I think, which we're all treated the same, which is really nice. I mean, we're getting the same amount of funding as an at-risk district would receive. There's pressure. I mean, there's absolute pressure to ensure that every student is going to have access to this program. And we're almost under a mandate to ensure that we are able to service 100% of our population through this preschool funding. And they will fund it 100% in our effort to get there. We're at 6 this year, we'll be at 8 the following year, and we will be at 9 or 10, whatever it's going to take that third year to ensure that we have no waiting list, that everyone gets in. So that's about the best I can do, is the fact that they're just totally separate, you know, at this time in terms of the funding resources. All right. Once, President.
Brief recess before we continue on with our action meeting. Do I need a motion? No. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute recess before we move forward with the remainder of our action meeting. So I don't know what we can do. All right, we're gonna go ahead and resume the meeting.
He's not.
Okay.
Tell you why.
All right, okay. That's all, And we are back to live streaming. Great. Mrs. Rose, do we have any correspondence?
We do not.
I will now move to accept a motion for the minutes of the Pitman Board of Education as held on the dates listed below are approved and printed and reading dispensed with. May I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? Okay, President's report. February 23rd, the NJSBA held a virtual Gloucester and Camden County meeting. I was able to attend as well as Mrs. Pote, Mrs. Farrell, and Mrs. Papalardo. Dr. Greason was our guest speaker, and his presentation was on the importance of civil rights in education within New Jersey. In New Jersey, the state statute requires boards of education to be members of the NJSBA, so we're mandated to join the NJSBA and pay our membership dues to them. But they do provide some really great training opportunities, such as these county meetings that are free for members of the Board of Education to attend. And they assist us in serving our community by furthering our governance mindset and ensuring that we are as up to date as possible on multiple educational issues. February 28th, I had an opportunity to sit down with Councilperson Adam Mazzola, the Borough Council Board of Education liaison. We discussed additional opportunities for the Borough and Board of Education to collaborate and maximize any potential opportunities for the shared resources. The Board of Education appreciates the Council and Mayor's ongoing support of Pitman Public Schools. On May 1st, I virtually attended the NJSBA All-Day Finance Conference. I don't know for other Board of Education members that it was perhaps my most useful training event. I would probably put a pin in it next year when we're looking at how to best allocate our training resources in terms of that particular conference. Our strategic planning process continues to move forward, and the survey link will continue to be open until March 24th. Please take an opportunity, if you've not already done so, to answer the survey. You can also find a QR code and a link to the survey on our social media websites and at Borough Hall. And as always, if you should need to reach any Board of Education members, our emails are listed on the district website. Any nonprofits whose sole function is to support Pitman Public Schools students are welcome to email me in advance of the next meeting if there's any fundraisers or events they would like shared. I'll turn it over to Mr. Crispin.
Your HIB report for the month is listed as an attachment, and as well as your security drills.
Okay. Does the board have any questions? Okay. That will take us to our student representative report.
This past weekend, the drama program finished their show, The Little Mermaid. While I was personally unable to attend the shows, it is very well received among students and staff. Here in Pitman, I believe our music program is unique in the way that even students and teachers not involved in music can share excitement over events such as these. One of the upcoming events is the Academic Bowl. Events such as the Academic Bowl are absolutely essential to the high school experience, and I know many students look forward to participating in the Spirit Week beforehand. On behalf of the student body, I would like to thank those who always ensure that there is some sort of fun event to look forward to.
I will now turn it over to the Finance and Facilities Committee. Chairperson Grossman.
The Finance and Facilities Committee met on Wednesday, the 8th at 12:30. Myself, Board President April Miller, Board Member Rebecca Higby-Iona, Steve Crispin, Carissa Rose. Main items were obviously the budget, shocker, which we covered mostly in depth, but just other things discussed are on the agenda. Item 6, a renewal of software support contract with Computer Solutions, an increase in cost. Like everything else, everything goes up year to year. Items 7 and 8 are related together. Our STEM grant, to accept the grant and phase 2 of the STEM grant. And item number 9 was just we had to put an action plan together for food service lines we purchased in 21 to amend those funds to the current budget. That's all I have.
Do you want to move the items to vote, Dave?
I'm sorry?
Move it.
Oh. So I move that we accept items 1 through 9 as written.
Mrs. Rose, call the roll. Iona?
Yes.
Papalardo?
Yes.
Bolton?
Yes.
Farrell?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Grossman?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes. I will now turn it over to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee. Chairperson Papalardo.
Good evening. The Curriculum and Instruction Committee met on Tuesday, March 7th at 4:45 p.m. In attendance were Mr. Crispin, Mrs. Rose, Mrs. Moody, Mrs. Bolton, Mrs. Pote, and myself. Some of the items we discussed included the increasing cost of field trips and consistency among these trips within all elementary buildings, the updated job description that has been created for all district nurses, the hiring of a part-time math coach at the middle school, shift in hours for grounds maintenance employee, updates to the existing school calendar for 22-23 school year, as well as a look ahead at next year's calendar for 23-24. And just as noted for finance and facilities, we discussed some of the budgetary concerns for the upcoming 23-24 school year. With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 2 through 33 as written.
Second vote. Did you hear me? Second vote.
Any discussion? I apologize, I skipped that
That's
on
okay.
the previous. Seeing none, Mrs. Rose, call the vote.
Iona?
Yes to all except 32.
Papalardo?
Yes.
Bolton?
Yes.
Farrell?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Grossman?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes. I will now turn it over to our Communication and Policy Chair.
The Communication and Policy Committee met on March 8th at 5 p.m. Myself, Board of Ed President Miller, and member Melissa Farrell were in attendance, in addition to Mr. Crispin and Mrs. Rose. We have no action items this month. The committee is recommending that the district rent classroom space to a summer camp taught by one of our district teachers. The camp ran last year to good reviews, and we also believe having the camp located here in Pitman is a benefit to our families. Take advantage of the program. Committee also had a brief discussion of the recent high school sustainability meeting and ideas shared at that meeting, and the potential need for future policy changes in connection with efforts to attract additional students to the high school. The committee also discussed the issue of allowing students who choose to leave the district for high school to return to participate in Pitman High School extracurricular activities. We're inclined as a committee to recommend that we only allow participation in such activities that we are required by law to allow. But we'd like to hear from the rest of the board on this issue. The committee also briefly discussed needing to ensure that the district's existing policy of requiring all volunteers for our extracurricular programs be fingerprinted for criminal background checks to ensure the safety of our students and staff. And the final discussion items was the issue of the many requests that we get for the district to distribute flyers from outside organizations or companies advertising their events or services to district families. This was also discussed at last month's meeting, and we would still like to hear from other Board of Ed members and, interested community members, as we need to just establish a policy on this so that we all know where the line is between liberally allowing or not allowing our district to distribute what's basically advertising for outside organizations.
So we will now have our second public hearing. This is the second public comment. Please state your name, municipality of residence, and group affiliation if applicable, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. We also ask that you speak at the microphone. Seeing no one, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Papalardo.
Second, Grossman.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? The next Board of Education meeting is scheduled for April 19th. Thank you.